Welcome to ESG Decoded, where we navigate the evolving landscape of environmental, social, and governance, ESG. Join me, Amanda Shea, Kaitlyn Allen, and Erica Schiller as we explore the intersection of sustainability, innovation, and ethical leadership.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to ESG Decoded. I'm your host, Kaitlyn Allen, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming ClimeCo CEO Bill Flederbach back to the podcast. Hey, Bill.
Hey, Kaitlyn. Nice to be back.
Yeah, and we have a kind of a fun topic today. We've been doing a few conference recaps. So if those of you who listened about North American Carbon World, we are going to do one today with Bill about a conference he recently attended and that ClimeCo sponsored called Decarb Connect. And Decarb Connect is a phenomenal organization founded by Alex Cameron, who I believe, if I have the story correctly, kind of saw this gap in the market, so to speak, of industrial decarbonization, bringing those players together to talk about hard to abate sectors and what progress can be made there. So just a phenomenal organization. ClimeCo has been going since I want to say the first year of the conferences a few years ago, which I had the pleasure of attending in Houston. And Bill just went to the Decarb Connect North America, which was March 26th through 28th, 2024. And we thought it would be fun to have him on to talk a little bit about his perspective and takeaways on that conference. So Bill, over to you. Let's chat. What's the kind of first thing that struck you as a takeaway?
One of the first things that struck me, Kaitlyn, was the timing of the conference versus a very large DOE announcement on March 25th. I don't know what was timed, how that was all coordinated, but there was an announcement that a lot of us are well aware of the DOE under the Inflation Reduction Act, granting $6.1 billion with a B as in boy, $6.1 billion to the hard to decarbonize sector. And it was really interesting as I was looking at who received the funding. You know, there's about 5 different buckets of capital that went out. Chemicals and refining received $1.3 billion of projects. That was seven companies. The cement sector was a big focus, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the cement sector. The two of the largest grants, the largest single grant given out was $500 million. And there are 2 cement companies that each received $500 million. So that's just by those 2 alone, that's $1 billion out of the $6 billion in the cement space. Everybody realizes that's a hard to decarbonize. So $1.6 billion went out to cement companies, iron and steel, aluminum, the whole metal sector. 6 companies won $1.5 billion. And you see that includes aluminum as well. So with the aluminum, the count is 11, steel and aluminum facilities receiving capital. And then food and beverage. Actually, there was a joke that there was a pasta company that received a grant as well. But, so it's, and then there's actually 1 pulp and paper. So you can really see a diversity, but yet a real clustering over the hard to decarbonize. And when I looked at the clients that were at the meeting, boy, they certainly mirrored the recipients of the grants. I didn't take note to all, but companies that ClimeCo had met with were certainly some of our clients in the petrochemical industry. That would include the fertilizer sector. That could include as well carbon black, for instance. Certainly the steel sector was there. Energy, lime, and cement were all some of our clients that were at the meeting. And what I also found exciting was just hearing more, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, is the partnerships that we're seeing between energy companies and the hard to decarbonize, between supply chain. The Pirelli was there, and so was their suppliers of carbon black, looking at innovative solutions together with respect to low carbon products in tires, which fascinating. So I think just the industry collaboration, and I think what you had said about Alex's drive to combine the hard to decarbonize space, this is a phenomenal event. And I always say it's great that we can meet with so many of our customers and prospects at one location. And it's certainly nice to be located here in Houston again and have it in our backyard, which is fantastic.
Yeah. And for those, I believe our listeners should know what DOE is, but for those who are maybe international, that's the U.S. Department of Energy, who's given out these grants under their Inflation Reduction Act. And so, great timing. Alex, how did you know? We admire you, Alex.
Yeah, I think the Department of Energy was probably wanting to announce it before Alex's conference. So she's been the catalyst. I'll give Alex credit. She'll love that.
Totally. Well, yeah, so this is, it's really interesting, and we know this theme, right, from all of innovation, right, how government can help spur innovation in certain areas. But your panel specifically was about, or the panel you participated in was about how grants are a component of financing these technology innovations. So would love to hear a little bit about that panel and what was discussed.
Yeah, because I tell you, it's such a challenge to finance projects of this size. And I kind of look at it, and our panel was great. We had some really fantastic experience on the panel. I was a facilitator and a participant. But when we really look at the financing in this space, we look at it as, very clear investor bifurcation. So, early stage capital, this is your classic clean tech venture capital. That's, proof of concept business. We're seeing these are smaller checks. A lot of the tech companies that are looking at the decarbonization space, not that it's not challenging to get capitalized in investment capital in this space, but it's not as challenging. Again, these are smaller checks. These are funds that have designed portfolios of capital meant to stir innovation. Where the challenge is once you start to move into growth equity, which is really the execution and scale up phase of the technology. So a lot of companies are having a hard time getting out of that early stage, being able to show a clear path to profitability, to free cash flow. And this is the big challenge that we have. So these are the bigger checks. These are the Warburg Pincus, TPG, Energy Capital Partners. These are the larger checks, and they really need to see that path to profitability. So, this sector is the growth equity phase, or growth equity participants are excited about the DOE grants, because certainly that helps unlock some value. But if you look at, even on the cement side, a $500 million grant is absolutely incredible. It's mind baffling. But those projects are very easily over $1 billion. So there's still a lot to raise around that equity, but I'm excited. I'm hopeful that the growth equity participants will have a different point of view now that some of the capital from the Department of Energy is being doled out to some of the customers. But this is the real challenge: is clear path to profitability on the growth equity raise. Typically, once you get beyond growth equity, then you'd be looking at infrastructure funds, which are for more mature businesses. Certainly, we're not there yet. I think a lot of the investor space, or a lot of the investors that we're looking at, as well as our clients, are what we call strategic investors. And these are the more unique ones, where they may have non-economic characteristics. So they may not be driven like a VC or a growth equity fund would be driven with respect to return on capital. Some of the non-economic characteristics could be outsourced R&D. So large energy companies that want to show that they're decarbonizing may be able to invest at scale, and it's really an extension of an R&D budget. It doesn't have to have clear economic drivers attached to it. Sometimes we're seeing strategic investors invest as a result of really needing a social license to operate, right? They're collecting logos, showing investors that they're decarbonizing. So there are a lot of strategic investors that are at the table that we need to be in communication with. So again, investing in this space is hard. The early stage clean tech is probably the easiest. Once you get to growth equity, it becomes a challenge. And certainly the Department of Energy grants are helping facilitate growth equity capital, which is really where we see the bigger checks. And we're in communication and working with clients that are recipients of the grants. And now it's okay. We have some equity from the government. It's matching. Now, does that change the thesis of growth equity investors? How can we show that path to profitability? But still the challenge, Kaitlyn, is on a lot of these carbon capture, the upfront seed capital is really for some of the upfront studies, et cetera. But these projects are still clearly off 5 to 7 years. And that's a long time. So that path to profitability, or path to free cash flow, is really still the challenge. So even though there's a lot of capital coming to the project, how are growth equity investors looking at it now, when in reality, we're not going to be capturing in storing carbon dioxide from some of the hard to decarbonize space, perhaps not until 2030 or beyond. So I think there's a ton of excitement in the economic environment that we're in the last year. There's been a lot of hesitation with growth equity, looking at that thesis of free cash flow and profitability. So we're hoping that some of the DOE grants ease up, some of the constraints on the investments.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of just over the years speaking with folks who are doing venture capital in Houston and hard tech, the sort of actual on the ground facilities that are needed to make whatever it is, all of the modern products that make our worlds go round, and how there was always sort of a tension with, say, the Silicon Valley VC model, right? Where a Houston company would try and go pitch to Silicon Valley VC and really struggle because they're used to it's a SaaS product, software as a service, kind of a proven model. It's a new cool software, very, very low OpEx and relatively low CapEx compared to this sort of thing. Sure, here's a big check. And then they could go scale it and get a relatively quick return. Energy, infrastructure, cement, like these are not the sort of things that can, lend themselves well to that quick return model. Mm-hmm. So I think it's an important thing, though, that folks recognize how critical it is to the future that growth capital is unlocked. And so, of course, it's wonderful that the DOE has been able to support that, even though it may not be enough, right? But hopefully can turn the thesis for at least a number of investors.
It's amazing too, Kaitlyn, is the DOE's announcement that along with the $6.1 billion, they were excited about this. On the flip side, I thought the number was incredibly low, that the $6.1 billion would generate 14 million tons of CO2 captured and stored annually.
Wow, that's not very many.
That's not much at all.
What do we do, Bill?
Yeah, significant. Yeah. So I think in one of our projects right now in China, we're abating 15 million tons a year.
At an incredibly low
15 million tons a year, and they're going to achieve 14 million tons a year with $6 billion of investment. So when we say hard decarbonize and out of the money investments, this is the challenge.
Wow.
So what does the price of carbon have to be if we're talking about how are we going to finance these projects? So a lot of the conference had to do with awakening consumer awareness. And this was where I got a bit excited. At least the DOE came right out and said that, none of this is going to work unless we awaken the consumers. Are they willing to pay a premium for low carbon products? And that's the question, right? So, and, in our business in sustainability, looking at scope 3 and looking at supply chain, there are goals being set now to reduce scope 3 emissions, but are those customers willing to pay a premium for what it takes? And a premium for what it takes when we're looking at some of the cement sector on top of the Department of Energy grants, we're still modeling that we would need $150 to $200 a ton for starters and with escalators on carbon. So if we can add that price of carbon onto the grants and the other investments necessary, those projects, could start to be in the black eventually, so, but that's a hefty price for a ton of carbon, as we know. So it really is a challenge. I am hopeful that where the industry is going is trying to drive that premium for the product. What we call in our vernacular, if you're going to reduce the carbon and sell the product with that low carbon attribute, we like to call it as an inset, right? Because we're in the offset or inset world. So we like to say that that's an inset or the ability to create an environmental product declaration that will go with your purchase that says you're buying a low carbon product, but low carbon versus what? What is the industry baseline? Is it well communicated? Some are. Cement sector is. We know some of the petrochemical sector, it's not publicly available well. Certainly with a lot of petrochemical clients in China, it's very challenging to find out what the baseline is. So what are you comparing it to? Your product, I think, is a challenge. But I am excited about consumers coming to the table and being willing to pay that premium if they're setting the goals to decarbonize. And, when they're not willing to pay a premium, Kaitlyn, at ClimeCo, we talk a lot about creating the offset then, or the derivative, something that's unbundled from the product. And right now, that's where we are. We're still finding buyers willing to pay for the offset and overlay that onto their emissions as part of their decarbonization strategy. As they're trying to decarbonize themselves within their fence line, they're also looking at mechanisms like offsetting to help them get to zero quicker while technology catches up, and then they can wean off offsets essentially. But we're seeing customers look at that. But right now, in a lot of our hard to decarbonize space or sectors, we're still looking at taking the product when we're reducing the emissions. And if there's a protocol that we can use to create a carbon offset, we're still probably 98% of the time selling it as a carbon offset, not as an inset low carbon product, simply because the market's not willing to pay a premium yet for it. So this is where we're testing that thesis now. We're seeing clients come to the table that are willing to pay a premium. Like, again, it's probably 2% of all of our transactions so far, but my hope is that becomes 50%, over the next 5 years, as companies are hoping to decarbonize. So that's the challenge. I think that put it really into perspective, though, didn't it, Kaitlyn? It was $6.1 billion for 14 million tons a year.
And we do that on one line
on one project.
N2O abatement. Yeah, it's pretty. And I mean, I think that also helps highlight why the environmental commodity that we call an offset or a carbon credit, when they're high quality and verified, et cetera, which we take for granted at ClimeCo. I know that's not always the case, but when that's the case, that is the quickest way to drive emissions down today that we have. And when you look at those numbers, like, wow, that is a huge amount of investment for what we do in one facility for a very low price per ton compared to that, even compared to nature-based offsets, right? So I think it's really important to draw that distinction, say, like, yes, we as an industry want there to be more within the fence line value chain decarbonization, also known as inset, but unless that demand is there, both from the B2B consumer and the B2C consumer, right, in willingness to pay, having that attribute sold separately as a commodity that someone is willing to pay for is a way to drive that action today. I mean, this kind of continues the theme of what Eric and I spoke about on the NACW North American Carbon World recap was, is there a pause because of all of the fuss about offsets? Well, shoot, maybe there is a pause happening, and that's not good because we have so much power to drive decarbonization right now. But I think a lot of people aren't really aware of the complexity of everything that you're discussing here today. And I think sometimes in the conversation, folks want to just forget that things have to be economic in our world to make behavior change and make capital allocation decisions in business. And I think it's just, when you shared those numbers with me before, I almost fell out of my chair. I could not believe it.
Yeah.
But that gives really gives a sense of what we're dealing with.
Yeah. And it was interesting sitting in participating when I know some of our projects and what they achieved when the DOE sounded really excited about the 14 million tons a year. I almost put my head down and I thought, oh my God, is that inefficient capital? But I think these are critical components of infrastructure, right?
Yes.
Of the world. And I think the hope is that this innovation will create more innovation and also bring down the costs. I think that's one of the challenges is, some of the absolutely. DOE grants also are requiring clients to focus on a certain technology that's proven today. Mm-hmm. But some of the challenges that we have is that innovation is, my first bucket of investor, that early stage clean tech capital, that money's coming and it's freeing up new technology. So what may cost, $200 a ton today may cost $50 a ton to abate 5 years from now. So
Yeah.
how quickly do you want to move on old technology when new innovation is coming, but it's not at the growth phase yet? It's not at that growth equity. So this is where that bifurcation of investments too, like where are you putting your money? So it is a real challenge. I think I also get excited about the cross industry partnerships that we're seeing. The energy clients, customers working on carbon capture. The oil and gas energy space is heavily invested in carbon capture projects now. That's exciting. Seeing some of the supply chain orientation at Decarb Connect, like I had mentioned earlier, tire manufacturing with suppliers, talking about solutions on low carbon products. But you said something important with respect to the demand for carbon, whether or not it's a demand for a low carbon product or it's a demand for carbon. If there's no demand, there won't be supply and there won't be innovation. And like our project, I'm thinking of one of our other projects in the U.S. that we abate around 6 million tons a year. Before we move forward with that, we had to be confident that there was a demand for 6 million tons a year of offsets. So our client in ClimeCo could justify our expense to move forward with that project. And that's a big investment, certainly not $6 billion, but it's a large investment. So if there aren't customers out there willing to pay for that product, innovation won't happen. So there is low hanging fruit that we can make these reductions at scale. But if consumers are nervous about using an offset as part of their strategy and the demand lightens, emissions will continue, and we won't see the CO2 abatement that we're hoping for and needing. But I think the conference for me was probably one of the, as we go to a lot of conferences every year, and each one serves a unique purpose. ClimeCo is really focused on the hard to decarbonize industries. And it was such a refreshing 2.5 days of networking and idea sharing. And I'm looking forward to our next Decarb Connect. Certainly, we're going to be participating here in Houston every year, but Decarb Connect is global. So they have conferences throughout the globe.
Now I'm thinking we need to ask Alice to sponsor this episode because we did. People are going to think we're just like reminding. We actually really just absolutely love this. They also have the Decarbonization Leaders Network, which we're a part of. And that's just another way that they help create those connections across industry. And so, Alex, look out for the sponsorship email. But no, Bill, I appreciate you joining me today to talk about this. And I think the challenges are certainly massive, but anytime there's huge challenges, there's huge opportunities. And just really happy that we're able to play in this space and help be part of some of the new world that everyone's working to create. So thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Kaitlyn.
And you can also check out our blog that was recently posted by other members of our team with their key takeaways from this conference. You can find that on our website, and we'll also include that link in the resources for this episode. Thank you so much.
Whether you're a seasoned ESG practitioner or embarking on your sustainability journey, ESG Decoded is your trusted source for inspiration and actionable insights for responsible business practices. Subscribe on your favorite streaming platforms to be notified of new episodes drop bi-weekly on Tuesday mornings, and connect with us at ESG Decoded on social media or by visiting www.climeco.com.